Hi everyone, this is Dan, and this is the Fantastic Four Epic Collection. Actually, it's not really says Volume 1, it just says the world's greatest comic magazine. Anyhow, this is another one of Marvel's Epic Collections. It says Volume 1 back here, but it doesn't say Volume 1 on the spine. Anyhow, why did I get this? Besides it being a fantastic trade paperback by Marvel, one of the better collections along with the Amazing Spider-Man one. Well, this book catalogs the very beginning of Marvel Comics, the real Marvel Comics as we know it right now. And it also catalogs the sensational first issue right here, the Fantastic Four #1, published in November 1961. So this is it, the very first Marvel Comics comic book. You know, it doesn't actually say Marvel on it, it just says independent, right? The Fantastic Four #1. 10 cents back in 1961. I can't turn invisible fast enough. How can we stop this creature, Torch? Just wait and see, sister. The Fantastic Four have only begun to fight. The three of you can't do it alone. It's time for the Thing to take a hand. It'll take more than ropes to keep Mr. Fantastic out of action. He never actually gets caught in ropes, by the way. I'm not really sure how this cover works, but okay. Anyhow, yeah, so this issue of Fantastic Four from 1961 is written by Stan Lee, drawn by Jack Kirby, and it stars Dr. Reed Richards, Ben Grimm, Susan Storm, and Johnny Storm. So, yeah, this is actually a super long issue, very interesting. And for 10 cents, this is a ton of value. Even with the inflation-adjusted value of 10 cents, this is a crazy amount of value. Because this story spans... what is this? Oopsie. So 29 to 5. Yeah, it's... Oh, well, actually, no, it's 24 pages. Feels like it's more than 24 pages. At least when I was reading through it, but that's always... the case with these older comics, right? These older comics trace their lineage from the pulp, so there's a lot more writing and a lot more stuff going on in the older comics. Anyhow, let's get into this. Here you get a big flash of cloud, the Fantastic Four, and then here's a shadow in a building. You know, it's the first time I've found it necessary to give this signal. I pray it will be my last. You know, you got a lot of dynamic Jack Kirby, right? Even though the art in this issue's obviously not great by modern standards. If you think of it in the context of the time, right, especially if you compare it to the Green Lantern issues that I did before, it's way more dynamic the way the shots are, right? There's way more impact to the shots, right? So here's Susan Storm just being a socialite. She disappears and sort of BTFOs on her friend right here. Little Irish goodbye. As she runs away and freaks the hell out of this dude right here. And then this trench-cloaked figure, who's pretty massive, shows up, and it's the Thing, Ben Grimm, and he kind of smashes through half of New York on his way to meet up with the rest of the gang. And over at this car garage here is Johnny Storm working on the car till he eventually decides, well, screw this car, I'm gonna ignite and melt the car and fly out. You know, if you look at the synopsis or the plot script that Stan Lee gave to Jack Kirby, you could tell that Jack Kirby took a lot of liberties with the script, and I think probably had like a different idea of who these characters were compared to maybe what Stan had in mind. But you know, Stan kind of makes up for it with the text. This is early Marvel, so there's a lot of like ironing out if you kind of like analyze this issue a lot. There's a lot of times where the art doesn't necessarily tell the plot or the story, so Stan Lee has to come in and add captions and writing to kind of explain it. Or there's a lot of panels that doesn't necessarily explain explicitly what's going on, and Stan Lee kind of has to go over and above to explain with words or captions or whatever he's doing right here. This is also before Stan Lee started using more thought balloons, so there's not that many thought balloons in this first issue of Fantastic Four. I think he starts using that in later issues, which is very interesting. You get a lot of you get a very manga feel when you read this issue of Fantastic Four. For those of you who know what I'm talking about in manga, they have a lot of times the character will talk out loud what they're thinking or what they're doing or what they're planning to do, which is sort of interesting because everybody can hear them, right? Anyhow, Torch scares a bunch of pilots and basically wastes millions of dollars of the United States government, while a heat seeker Mensul comes after him. But Mr. Fantastic kind of freaking BTFOs the missile and saves Johnny, and the crew get together. And then we jump, and Stan Lee has a separate part of this opening where he kind of explains what's going on. And you get the opening right here, and this is kind of the beginning of sort of setting the premise of who these characters are. Like, you notice Reed here has got kind of a smug look. There's Ben, and he's kind of like angry and always sort of exclamating and clashing with Reed. There's Sue, always kind of worried about both Reed and Ben. And then there's Johnny in the background, kind of feeling very disinterested in all this. Anyhow, the whole point here is that Reed basically says, hey, we've got to fly out to space and beat those communists, right? If you actually read the synopsis in the back of this book of what Stan Lee was kind of planning, he kind of had like the attitude that many Americans in the 60s had with about the Russians and the communists and whatnot, that, you know, America's falling behind, we've got to do what it takes to catch up to them, etc. Remember, this is technically, 1961 is before the United States really had major accomplishments in space, right? So a lot of this is influenced by the state of America at the time that this was written. So yeah, so Sue Storm kind of calls him out, Ben out, because Ben is saying, hey, you know, we don't know what the heck is going to happen if we fly out there in a spaceship with those cosmic rays. And she kind of calls him out as a coward, and then he's like, because he has the hots for Sue, he's like, nobody calls me a coward, I'm going out there with you. So they break into a freaking spacecraft and fly out there, and they end up getting blasted by cosmic rays. Like, these panels right here are like classic Kirby. Like, Kirby's style would be kind of defined by this kind of stuff. Anyhow, the cosmic rays force them to crash land, and when they fall down to Earth, they find out they have gained superpowers. So Sue Storm can become invisible. Ben Grimm has become sort of a rock monster. Johnny Storm can basically catch on fire, and Reed Richards is Luffy. I mean, Mr. Fantastic. He can stretch like rubber and all this other stuff, right? And they come together and vow to fight injustice in the world as the Fantastic Four. But it's not that straightforward. What's kind of interesting is, even though the premise here, if you just sort of read the plot, is very silly, much like any superhero sort of rag, but the revolutionary aspect about the Fantastic Four in this time period was the nature of the characters, how they were written, how their attitudes and their personalities came through in the comic book. This is much more human than a DC comic book. Reed and Ben are constantly at each other. Sue is worried about Reed. At the same time, she understands that Ben still has the hots for her, and she kind of manipulates him. Johnny's kind of the hothead in the group. He's kind of younger than everyone else, so he's always kind of doing whatever the hell he wants to do. You know, there is a family-like aspect. I know that phrase gets used a lot when describing the Fantastic Four, but it came through in this book much more than the rival DC's books at the time. And it proved to be extremely effective, even though it feels dated at this time if you read it nowadays. Just because the competition at the time had not even come close to what Stan Lee was doing in this book. In addition, even though you could say that the figure drawing right here was, you know, if you compare it to the Green Lantern, the figure drawing in Fantastic Four is actually not as good as what is it, Gil Kane was doing and others were doing in DC at the time. But it didn't matter, because Jack Kirby's angles, what he was using to tell the story, was so much more dynamic than what DC was doing, that the Fantastic Four, even though looking at it now it doesn't seem that impressive, it was a big deal back in the days compared to what was out at the time. You know, a lot of times, sometimes it isn't about being the best, it's just about being better than who you're competing with. I mean, sports is kind of riddled with that kind of stuff, right? Anyhow, the main major plot of this first issue is the Fantastic Four meet the Mole Man, which is what you get advertised right here. So it turns out a bunch of atomic sort of power stations are getting swallowed up in the earth, and these great monsters are coming out and terrifying people. And this causes Reed Richards to freak out and tell the Fantastic Four, we gotta go find them, and I think I know where they are. They're on Monster Island. Which everyone's like, what the hell? So, of course, they fly out to Monster Island to face the entire cast of Godzilla. And, you know, Reed Richards tackles one of the monsters, and they end up falling, him and Johnny end up falling through a hole. And they get blasted with some light and blinded and blacked out. And they end up in a bunch of really weird suits that I don't understand. They don't actually serve any purpose in the plot, other than to say that the suits sort of, I guess, protect them from, well, I mean, their eyes are still exposed to, whatever. The whole point being is they meet the Mole Man. And on the top of the island, Sue uses her invisibility to avoid a monster until she runs out. And the Thing basically tosses this monster into the ocean, and they run off to go try and find the rest of their team. Down in the depths of this island, the Mole Man explains his origin, which is actually kind of tragic. It's actually really sad when you read it. You're like, wow, this guy basically was deformed from birth, and everyone in society rejected him, and he ran around trying to escape society, fell into a hole, and he ended up being blinded after falling through that hole. But he ended up gaining the ability to command all these monsters that lived in the deeps, right? So then he shows for a couple panels how he is still capable of sensing stuff and seeing stuff despite being blind, and kind of beats the crap out of Mr. Fantastic while he's doing that, and explains his dastardly plan to annihilate the world. Until the Thing shows up and tries to fight him, but then this mole monster shows up. Which luckily Johnny Storm kind of distracts him while Mr. Fantastic grabs the Mole Man. And all these monsters show up, and the Fantastic Four kind of say, well, fuck this. And then they dash off and fly away while the island kind of explodes. And, you know, Reed Richards kind of leaves a really cold comment right here. It's best that way. There's no place for him in our world. Perhaps he'll find peace down there. I hope so. Kind of interesting. Reed Richards is kind of a dick throughout most of these early comics, and which is despite that being a turnoff, it kind of makes it interesting to read the Fantastic Four, because all four of the characters have obvious flaws that get explored throughout this, and it becomes sort of like a spicy soap opera in a way. I think Stan Lee probably never intended people to truly admire Reed Richards other than people who just, you know, like the science, right? And the same thing with any of these characters, right? Like Johnny Storm can be courageous and exciting, but he can also be a hothead and an idiot. Ben can be probably the one with the most heart, but at times he's kind of crude and crass and, you know, has no subtlety. And then Sue, well, shit, man, these early issues, just freaking look up her problems with Namor. You can see the problems with Sue. At the same time, though, she's the kindest one in the group, right? So, pretty interesting going through this first issue right here. As far as like my view of this issue in the context of other Marvel stuff that came out, I understand historically why this issue is important. But for me personally, I'm not really big into the Fantastic Four. It's good in historical context, but I'm much more fond of the early issues of Spider-Man than I am Fantastic Four. I like Spider-Man a lot more than the Fantastic Four. That doesn't mean that this is necessarily bad. There's definitely some pretty great issues by Stan in here. But I wouldn't say this is like his best work. I think historically speaking, this is important, but in terms of just overall quality, I would look more at his Spider-Man and his Silver Surfer than I would his Fantastic Four. I think in this case, he was just trying to come up with the perfect combination to excite people and grab onto this fledgling company versus, you know, the other spandex dudes across the street, right? Anyhow, so art. So I just penciled something together right here. Again, I know it's nicer when you ink and color things. I get it. Lately, I've been trying to figure out time management issues. It's been pretty tough, as you can tell from the spacing between videos nowadays. But yeah, so this is a penciled sort of 4-pack. So here's Sue Storm, Mr. Fantastic, the Torch, or I should say Invisible Woman, Mr. Fantastic, the Torch, and the Thing. Yeah, it would look better inked, but I've just kind of been running out of time lately, so I just penciled this up real quickly. I need to kind of figure out how to do things faster and like improve my time management. It's been kind of tough lately. But, you know, not a bad piece for the most part. I kind of like how I drew the Thing and Torch. I don't like how I drew Sue Storm. This was, I don't know why. It just didn't work out that well. It just doesn't look right. Yeah, oh well. You gotta do what you can, right? Anyhow, that's the video, guys. Let me know what you think. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hit the bell for notifications. If you got any comments on the Fantastic Four #1 or my art, leave it down below. And by the way, the reason why I did this is this leads into my next Marvel series, which isn't the Fantastic Four. It's this, the Fantastic Four versus the X-Men. Since it is relevant, since I just went over the origin of the Fantastic Four in this miniseries here. Excellent miniseries by... written by Chris Claremont, goes kind of over that. Anyhow, look forward to that one, and I will see you next time.